Amaka had always believed that hard work would open doors. Growing up in a middle-class Nigerian home, she had seen her parents work tirelessly to provide for her and her siblings. Her father was a schoolteacher and her mother sold fabrics in the market. They didn't have much, but they lived happily within their means. When she graduated with a degree in business administration, she thought her life was about to change. He was wrong. For months, Amaka sent out job applications. She attended interviews, faced rejection after rejection, and grew frustrated. Some employers told her she lacked experience, others never got back to her. Her savings were running low. The stress was getting unbearable. Then one afternoon her phone rang as she scrolled through job listings on her laptop in her room. It was an unknown number. "Hello, is this Miss Amaka Okafor?" a woman asked. "Yes, this is Amaka," she replied, heart pounding. "My name is Jane. I'm calling from R&B Consulting. We received your application for the assistant role. Can you come for an interview tomorrow by 10 a.m.? Amaka almost screamed in excitement. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be there. Thank you so much." She had finally gotten an opportunity. The next morning, Amaka wore her best corporate outfit and arrived at R&B Consulting early. After waiting nervously in the reception area, she was finally called in for an interview with Mr. Richard, the company's senior executive. The interview was tough, but Amaka answered every question with confidence. At the end, Mr. Richard leaned back and studied her. "You're smart," he said. "I like that. But this job requires discipline. Can you handle that?" "Sir. I am very hardworking." He nodded and handed her a folder. "You're hired. Welcome to R&B Consulting. You start on Monday." Amaka almost cried with joy. She had finally secured a job. A week into her new job, Amaka was assigned to attend a business conference with Mr. Richard. That was where she met Daniel. She was walking down a hallway when she accidentally bumped into someone. Papers flew everywhere. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Amaka said, bending down to pick up the documents. "It's okay," a deep voice said. She looked up and saw a tall, handsome man smiling at her. There was something warm and kind in his eyes. "I'm Daniel Wood," he introduced himself. "Amaka," she replied, still slightly embarrassed. They exchanged numbers and started talking. What began as casual conversations soon turned into long, deep discussions. Daniel was kind, intelligent, and unlike the rich, arrogant men she had met before. It didn't take long before they fell in love. Daniel's mother, Chief Mrs. Grace Wood, was a powerful businesswoman. She was the CEO of Wood Enterprises, a family empire that had been passed down for generations. She had high expectations for her son. One evening, Daniel finally told his mother about Amaka. "Mama, I've met someone," he said cautiously. Grace barely looked up from her newspaper. "Who?" "Her name is Amaka." "Where is she from?" "She's from Anambra, but she lives in Lagos." "What does her father do?" "He's a teacher." Grace slowly put down her newspaper and adjusted her glasses. "A teacher?" she repeated. "Yes, Mama. And her mother sells fabrics." Grace scoffed. "This is a joke, right?" Daniel clenched his fists. "No, Mama. I love her." Grace sighed heavily. "Daniel, listen to me. I have built our family's legacy for decades. You are the future of this company. You cannot marry just anybody." "She is not just anybody," Daniel argued. "She is an ordinary girl," Grace snapped. "She comes from nothing. She will bring nothing to this family." Daniel shook his head. "You don't even know her." Grace's lips tightened. "And I don't need to. A woman like that will never be good enough for you." She stood up. "I have already spoken to some of my friends. Their daughters are available. I will arrange meetings." Daniel's anger boiled. His mother hadn't even met Amaka, yet she had already rejected her. "I will not marry someone you choose," he said firmly. Grace's expression darkened. "Then you are making the biggest mistake of your life." Daniel stormed out. That night he called Amaka and told her everything. She was silent for a long time before whispering, "She doesn't even know me." "I don't care what my mother says," Daniel reassured her. "I love you." Amaka wanted to believe him. But she knew that fighting against family disapproval was never easy. After that, Amaka and Daniel continued their relationship, but it was clear that Grace would never approve. She began setting Daniel up with wealthy women. Every week he was invited to exclusive parties where her friends' daughters would try to impress him. But his heart belonged to Omaka. He hated the games his mother played, but she refused to stop. Meanwhile, Omaka continued working at R&B Consulting, trying to prove her worth in a world that seemed to be against her. Grace Wood was not a woman who easily changed her mind. She had spent decades building her family's business empire, and she was not about to let an ordinary girl from a middle-class family come in and ruin everything. When Daniel refused to listen to her, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She invited some of her wealthy friends over for lunch. Among them were Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Adewale, two women from high-class families. Their daughters, Adana and Vanessa, were exactly the kind of women Grace believed would be a perfect match for Daniel. As they sat in the luxurious dining room, Grace spoke openly. "My son is being stubborn," she said, stirring her tea slowly. "He's blinded by love for this girl." Mrs. Johnson sighed dramatically. "That's how these young men are. They always fall for the wrong people first. But don't worry, he will come to his senses." Grace nodded. "He has no choice. I will make sure of it." That was how the matchmaking began. Every weekend, Grace forced Daniel to attend events where wealthy young women were present. At first he refused. But when she threatened to cut off his business funding, he had no choice but to show up. Each time he sat across from women like Vanessa, Adana, and Tulu, women who only cared about money, designer clothes, and high society parties. One evening, Daniel found himself at a dinner with Vanessa, one of his mother's favorites. "So Daniel," Vanessa said, swirling her wine, "are you into yachts or private jets?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What? I prefer private jets. The air on yachts is just too humid. Plus, you never know when a storm will hit." Daniel sighed. He had had enough. He stood up and placed his napkin on the table. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me." Daniel turned to his mother. "Mama, you can force me to come here, but you cannot force me to fall in love." And with that he walked out. Daniel called Omaka later that night. "She's never going to stop," he said, frustrated. Omaka sighed. "Daniel, I don't want you to fight with your mother because of me." Daniel held his phone tighter. "Omaka, I love you. My mother needs to understand that." "But she won't," Omaka whispered. "She doesn't even know me and she already hates me." Daniel took a deep breath. "Then I will fight for us." But the pressure was getting to them both. Omaka couldn't shake the feeling that she would never be accepted. She had no money, no family connections, and no power in this battle. Meanwhile, Daniel was torn between the woman he loved and the mother who had raised him. One afternoon, Grace walked into Daniel's office and dropped a folder on his desk. "What's this?" Daniel asked, picking it up. "Information about Omaka's family." Daniel flipped through the pages. There were financial records, old photos of her parents, and even details about her father's salary. "She comes from nothing," Grace said. "She will bring you nothing. Do you want to tie yourself to a life of struggle?" Daniel felt anger rising inside him. "This is an invasion of privacy, Mama," he said coldly. "How could you do this?" Grace didn't flinch. "I'm protecting you." Daniel slammed the folder shut. "From what?" "Love." "From regret," Grace corrected him. Daniel shook his head. "You don't even know Omaka." "I don't have to," Grace said, standing up. "Girls like her. They always want something." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I love her. And I'm going to marry her one day whether you like it or not." Grace's expression turned cold. "Over my dead body." Daniel stormed out of the office. That night at his place he held Omaka close and whispered, "No matter what, I'm not letting go." Omaka wanted to believe him. But she knew that love alone was not always enough. And then one morning everything changed. Omaka woke up before dawn feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. Today was the most important day of her life. She had finally secured a job interview at Trident Holdings, one of the most prestigious companies in Lagos. It had taken months of rejections, disappointment, and sleepless nights, but she had finally gotten a chance. She had lost her job as an assistant to Richard when Richard learned of her relationship with Daniel Wood. Daniel's company and Richard's company were competitors in the market, so Richard believed Daniel planted Omaka to know the ongoings in his company, so he sacked her. Daniel, being a good fiancé, offered Omaka employment in his family company, but she declined. She wanted to steer clear of any drama with Daniel's family, especially his mother. Her interview was at 8 a.m. sharp. She couldn't afford to be late. She quickly freshened up and put on her best corporate outfit. She packed her documents into a neat folder, grabbed her purse and rushed out of her small apartment. Her heart pounded with excitement. Today was the day her life would change. Amaka hailed a taxi and checked her watch. 7:30 a.m. If the road was free, she would make it in time. She smiled, imagining how happy Daniel would be if she got this job. He had always supported her, always told her she would make it. She picked up her phone to send him a message. On my way to the interview. Wish me luck. Red heart. Just as she hit send, she heard it. A loud, deafening bang. Ba-aya. Amaka's head snapped toward the source of the noise. Across the road, a car had hit an elderly woman. People stood around watching. Some even brought out their phones to record the accident. But no one moved to help. Amaka's heart raced as she saw the woman lying on the ground, blood pooling beneath her head. She gasped for breath, her groceries scattered across the road. Amaka couldn't just sit there. "Stop the car," she shouted at the taxi driver. The man frowned. "Auntie, this Lego so. You go late for your work." "I said stop this here," she yelled. The taxi came to a screeching halt. Without thinking, Amaka flung open the door and ran toward the injured woman. The woman's eyes fluttered weakly. Amaka knelt beside her, holding her trembling hand. "Ma, can you hear me?" The woman's lips moved, but her voice was weak. "My daughter, help me," she gasped. Amaka felt her chest tighten. She turned to the bystanders. "Somebody help me. We need to get her to the hospital." A few hesitant men finally stepped forward. Together they lifted the injured woman and placed her in a taxi. Amaka jumped in with her. The taxi driver gave her a worried look. "Auntie, where we dey go?" "The nearest hospital." "Hurry." As the car sped off, Amaka checked her phone. 7:50 a.m. She knew what this meant. She was going to miss her interview. By the time they arrived at the hospital, nurses rushed toward them with a stretcher. They lifted the woman carefully and rolled her into the emergency ward. Amaka followed closely behind, her heart pounding. "Are you a family member?" a doctor asked her. "No. I just brought her here," Amaka said breathlessly. The doctor nodded. "She lost a lot of blood, but we'll do our best to stabilize her." Amaka felt a wave of relief. At least the woman had a chance. She checked her phone. 8:15 a.m. Her heart sank. She had missed the interview. She had lost her only chance at securing a job. Tears stung her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She had done the right thing. Hadn't she? But she couldn't give up now. Maybe, just maybe, she could still explain herself. She ran out of the hospital and hailed another taxi. "Trident Holdings," she told the driver. "Fast, please." The man nodded and sped off. By the time she arrived at the corporate building, she was out of breath. She hurried inside, clutching her folder tightly. The receptionist, a tall, serious-looking woman, barely glanced at her. "I had an interview scheduled for 8 a.m., Amaka said, panting. "I know I'm late, but it was an emergency. Please, can I still go in?" The receptionist didn't even flinch. "The interview is over." Amaka's heart dropped. "Please," she begged. "I had to save someone's life. I can explain." The receptionist gave her a blank stare. "If you were serious about the job, you would have been here on time." Amaka felt the lump in her throat grow. "Please, I just need 5 minutes with the hiring manager," she pleaded. "Just 5 minutes." The receptionist shook her head. "Sorry, Ma. No exceptions." Amaka's fingers tightened around her folder. She wanted to scream, to cry, to beg. But what was the point? She had already lost. With slow, painful steps, she turned around and walked out. When Amaka got home, she collapsed onto her bed. She tried to hold back the tears. She failed. She had spent so many months struggling, hoping, praying for an opportunity. And when she finally got one, she lost it. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. She hesitated before answering. "Hey, love," he said warmly. "How did the interview go?" Amaka swallowed hard. "I missed it," she whispered. Daniel's tone instantly changed. "What? Why?" Amaka took a shaky breath and told him everything. By the time she was done, Daniel was silent. Then he said softly, "I am so proud of you. Amaka sniffled. But I lost the job. You saved someone's life, Daniel said. That's more important than any job. Amaka closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had done the right thing. She just wished it didn't hurt so much. The next morning, Amaka couldn't stop thinking about the elderly woman she had saved. She decided to go back to the hospital to check on her. But when she arrived, she got a surprise. The elderly woman? The nurse asked. Oh, she was discharged early this morning. Her family came to pick her up. Amaka frowned. Oh, okay. Do you know who they are? The nurse smiled. Of course. That was Chief Mrs. Grace Wood. Amaka's heart stopped. Daniel's mother. The woman who hated her. Amaka felt dizzy. She had saved the life of the woman who didn't want her in her son's life. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Days later, Amaka was talking to Daniel on the phone when he suddenly said something shocking. My mother wants to meet you. Amaka almost dropped her phone. What? She had an accident on Monday and something changed in her. She said she's ready to meet you. Amaka's head spun. This was it. After all the rejection, Grace was finally willing to meet her. Amaka sat in the back seat of Daniel's car, staring out the window as they drove toward the Wood mansion. Her heart pounded so loudly that she could barely hear the sound of traffic outside. She was finally going to meet Grace Wood. For months, Grace had refused to acknowledge her. She had done everything in her power to keep her away from Daniel. Now suddenly, after the accident, everything had changed. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. Are you okay? Amaka swallowed hard. He wasn't sure. She nodded slowly. I don't know what to expect. Daniel gave her a reassuring smile. Neither do I. But whatever happens, I'm with you. Amaka exhaled deeply. She hoped this wasn't some sort of cruel joke. She had already lost so much because of this family. Now she was about to walk straight into their world. The Wood mansion was even more luxurious than she had imagined. As they drove through the massive iron gates, Amaka felt like she had entered a different world. The compound was sprawling with neatly trimmed hedges and tall palm trees swaying in the breeze. The mansion itself looked like something out of a fairy tale. White pillars, tall glass windows, gold-plated doors. This was power. This was wealth. And she was about to step right into it. The car stopped in front of the grand entrance, and a uniformed driver opened the door for them. Amaka hesitated for a second. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped out. The doors swung open and a maid led them into a large sitting room. And there, sitting elegantly on a velvet couch, was Chief Mrs. Grace Wood. The moment Grace laid eyes on Amaka, her expression changed. Her eyes widened in shock. Amaka froze. Her hands trembled. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then Grace whispered, I know you. Amaka's heart skipped a beat. Daniel frowned, looking between them. Mama, what do you mean? Grace slowly stood up. Her gaze was locked onto Amaka. You saved me. Amaka felt her breath catch in her throat. She had known this moment would come. She had known that Grace would eventually realize who she was. But nothing could have prepared her for the way the older woman looked at her now. With pure raw emotion. Daniel turned to Amaka, confused. Wait, what's going on? Amaka hesitated, then whispered, the woman I saved that day. It was your mother. Daniel's eyes widened. What? Grace's face softened. I thought I was going to die, she said quietly. But you held my hand. You fought for me. You saved my life even though you didn't have to. Amaka nodded slowly. I couldn't just leave you there. Grace took a shaky breath. You gave up your future that day. For a stranger. For the first time in her life, Chief Mrs. Grace Wood looked vulnerable. She stepped forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She reached out and took Amaka's hands in hers. "My daughter," she whispered. "You saved my life." Amaka felt her chest tighten. She had spent so long fighting for this woman's approval. And now, in a single moment, everything had shifted. Daniel was speechless. He had never seen his mother show this kind of emotion before. Grace turned to her son, her voice steady. "I was wrong about her, Daniel," she admitted. "I misjudged her." Daniel took a deep breath. "Mama, I've been telling you this all along." Grace nodded. For once she wasn't arguing. "I thought she wasn't worthy," she said, turning back to Amaka. "I thought you had nothing to offer." But now I see, you have more than any rich family name could ever give. You have a good heart. Amaka felt tears sting her eyes. She had imagined this moment so many times. She had pictured fights, insults, rejection. But not this. Not acceptance. Not love. Grace smiled at her warmly. I am proud to call you my daughter. As if that wasn't shocking enough, a few days later Grace invited Amaka to her mansion. Then she took out an envelope and handed it to Amaka. Amaka looked down at it, confused. What is this? Grace smiled. A job offer. Amaka's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter offering her a senior executive position at Wood Enterprises. Her breath hitched. She looked up, stunned. I don't understand. Grace held her hand firmly. You're my daughter now. You shouldn't be job hunting. Amaka let out a small laugh, blinking back tears. Yes, she whispered. She had fought against all odds. And now she had finally won. In the weeks that followed, Amaka began working at Wood Enterprises. She was no longer the struggling graduate looking for opportunities. She was now a powerful businesswoman respected in the corporate world. Even the employees who once whispered about her now saw her in a different light. And Grace? She had gone from being Amaka's biggest enemy to her strongest supporter. She took Amaka under her wing, teaching her how to navigate the business world. She's not just my son's fiancée, Grace told her business partners. She's my daughter. Amaka had finally earned her place in the family. Preparations for the wedding began almost immediately. And in the Wood family, a wedding was no small event. This wasn't going to be just a ceremony, it was going to be the wedding of the year. The guest list included top businessmen, politicians, celebrities, and foreign investors. Every detail had to be perfect. Amaka barely had time to breathe. There were dress fittings, cake tastings, venue inspections, and a million other things to do. But no matter how overwhelming it was, she loved every moment of it. Because at the end of it all, she would be marrying the man she loved. One evening, as Amaka sat in the grand sitting room, flipping through a wedding catalog, Grace walked in. She sat down beside Amaka and smiled. How are you holding up? Amaka chuckled. Barely. Grace placed a gentle hand on hers. You remind me of myself when I was getting married. Amaka looked at her in surprise. Grace Wood was talking about her wedding? Grace sighed. I was young, ambitious, and in love. Just like you. Amaka smiled. And were you happy? Grace hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes. But I learned that happiness in marriage isn't just about love. It's about strength, patience, and understanding. Amaka listened carefully. Grace wasn't just welcoming her into the family. She was preparing her for what was to come. Then Grace did something unexpected. She took off an expensive gold bracelet from her wrist and placed it in Amaka's hand. This belonged to my mother, Grace said softly. She gave it to me on my wedding day. And now I want you to have it. Tears filled Amaka's eyes. This was more than a gift. It was a blessing. Before the white wedding there was the traditional Igbo wedding. Daniel and his family traveled to Amaka's hometown in Anambra for the event. It was a colorful celebration filled with music, dance, and tradition. Daniel arrived in a convoy of black SUVs, bringing along wine, yams, cola nuts, and expensive gifts for Amaka's family. The elders performed traditional marriage rites, and Amaka, dressed in a stunning red George fabric with coral beads, performed the famous bride search. When she finally found Daniel, she knelt before him, offering him a cup of palm wine as a sign of acceptance. Daniel took the cup, smiled, and drank from it. The crowd erupted in cheers. They were now traditionally husband and wife. The white wedding was held at one of the biggest cathedrals in Lagos. It was a royal affair. The church was decorated with white roses, golden drapes, and chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. Amaka stood in front of the mirror in her white wedding gown, her heart pounding. She had dreamed of this day. She had imagined it so many times. But now that it was here, she felt overwhelmed with emotions. From being a jobless graduate to a rejected fiancé to becoming part of one of the wealthiest families in Nigeria. This was her moment. As the wedding bells rang, Amaka took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her father, dressed in a sharp agbada, held her arm. "My daughter," he whispered. "I am so proud of you." Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. As the doors swung open, all eyes turned to her. She walked down the long aisle, her white dress trailing behind her, her heart racing. And at the altar waiting for her was Daniel. His eyes shone with so much love. He had fought for her. He had never given up on their love. And today they would finally be one. The priest smiled at them. Do you, Daniel, would take Amaka Okafor to be your lawfully wedded wife? Daniel grinned. I do. The priest turned to Amaka. Do you, Amaka Okafor, take Daniel Wood to be your lawfully wedded husband? Tears shimmered in Amaka's eyes as she smiled through them. I do. The priest smiled. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Daniel pulled Amaka close and kissed her. The church erupted in cheers. The reception was held in a grand banquet hall, decorated with chandeliers and a massive wedding cake. There was music, laughter, dancing, and a feast fit for royalty. Amaka watched as her family and Daniel's family laughed together. It was hard to believe that just months ago, Grace had rejected her. Now Grace was holding her hand, smiling proudly. You're not just my son's wife, Grace whispered. You're my daughter. Amaka smiled. She had finally found her place. As the night went on, Amaka and Daniel stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Daniel wrapped his arms around her. Are you happy? He asked. Amaka leaned into him. Happier than I ever imagined. Daniel kissed her forehead. We made it. She smiled. Yes, we did. And as they stood there, embracing under the stars, Amaka knew one thing for sure. Love had won.